Welcome back to another episode of HR Game Changers. I'm Dave, and I'm excited to be joined today by HR expert Louisa. We're diving into something pretty interesting today, something you might not expect. It's the connection between tariffs and your HR strategy. Now, I know that may sound a little, unusual, but trust me, this is important stuff. We'll be looking at how tariffs are actually impacting the way companies find and keep great people, how they structure their teams, and even how they handle employee compensation. It's a whole new angle on HR, thanks to some great work from Brett Beauchamp-Russell.
It's amazing to think that tariffs, which we usually just consider numbers on a spreadsheet, have really become these strategic tools. They have a ripple effect across the entire business. We're talking hiring, training, even affecting where a company decides to physically locate. It's pretty fascinating.
It is fascinating. I mean, it's almost like a game of chess, with HR right there in the middle of the board. So can you give us an example of this ripple effect in action?
Absolutely. Think about it this way. If a company is suddenly hit with higher costs to import materials, they might start thinking about expanding their production right here at home. And that means new jobs, right? But on the flip side, let's say a company relies heavily on exporting their products. If they're facing higher tariffs in foreign markets, well, they might have to make some tough decisions, maybe reduce their workforce or even explore completely new markets to stay competitive.
It really does highlight how companies who are willing to adapt and see these tariff shifts as opportunities, they're probably the ones who will come out ahead.
Oh, absolutely. The companies that can turn a potential roadblock into a strategic advantage, those are the ones that will really thrive. Imagine a company that invests in training their employees so they can take on new roles, or a company that attracts those skilled workers by offering them a chance to be part of this newly expanded operation right here in their own country.
Yeah.
That's forward thinking.
Okay, so let's get into some specifics here. How are tariffs actually changing, the whole game when it comes to workforce planning?
One of the biggest trends we're seeing is this rise in reshoring and nearshoring. As tariffs make it, more expensive to produce goods overseas, businesses are naturally looking to bring those operations closer to home. And what does that mean? A surge in demand for certain types of jobs. We're talking logistics, operations, quality control, all those essential roles.
And I imagine that leads to some pretty fierce competition for skilled employees. And wouldn't that also mean, a potential increase in wages as well?
Absolutely. When manufacturers ramp up production locally, they need a very specific set of skills. They're looking for people who are proficient in areas like automation, lean manufacturing, supply chain optimization. And if you have a bunch of companies all competing for that same talent pool, well, salaries are going to climb. It also means employer branding becomes really, really important. Companies have to stand out. They have to showcase what makes them unique, what kind of career growth they offer, how they're investing in their employees' future. It's not just about finding the right people anymore. It's about attracting them in a competitive market.
That makes a lot of sense. But what about the companies that can't just pick up and relocate their operations? What are they doing to deal with these tariff-related challenges?
Well, remote work has become a game changer, especially for companies with global operations. By decentralizing certain functions, they can really minimize the disruptions caused by these tariffs. Let's say you have a research and development company, right? They could have teams spread out all over the world, collaborating virtually. This gives them access to a much larger talent pool, cuts down on overhead costs, and they might even be able to, sidestep some of those tariff issues altogether.
Yeah, that's a really smart strategy. But I imagine managing a global workforce has its own unique set of challenges, right?
Oh, of course. You've got to think about things like cross-cultural communication, staying compliant with laws in different countries, even just finding effective ways to track performance when your team is spread across like a dozen time zones.
Yeah.
And then there's onboarding new hires, no matter where they're located, making sure they feel welcome, part of the team. All of these challenges, they really highlight how crucial HR is, how it's become this strategic powerhouse for any company trying to navigate this new world.
It's really fascinating to see how deeply intertwined tariffs and HR truly are. We've talked about reshoring, we've talked about nearshoring, embracing remote work. But what happens when a company is just, they're unsure which direction to go in? What if they're hesitant to make big changes because of all this uncertainty surrounding tariffs? What then?
Well, we are seeing a lot of companies responding to that uncertainty by hitting pause, temporarily halting hiring altogether, or they shift to a more flexible model for their workforce.
So we're talking about hiring freezes and relying more on gig workers and contractors.
Exactly. It gives them that flexibility, that ability to adjust as the situation evolves. But there are some important things to think about with this approach, especially when it comes to managing and keeping your existing employees happy.
What are some of those considerations?
Well, if a company leans on that contingent workforce too much, or they keep those hiring freezes in place for too long, well, their full-time employees might start feeling, overworked, burnt out. It's like they're carrying the weight of those missing positions. And that's where HR really needs to step in. I mean, clear performance metrics can help, make sure everyone's pulling their weight. Flexible work policies can prevent burnout. And communication, open communication between management and employees, that's absolutely crucial for keeping morale high.
It's so interesting how something like tariffs, which seems so removed from the day-to-day of HR, can actually have such a huge impact. And one of the biggest factors in any business decision is the bottom line, right? So how are tariffs actually affecting compensation and benefits?
That is a huge question, and it's a tough one to answer. When tariffs push those material costs up, companies are going to look for ways to save money. And one of the first areas they often look at is, well, their compensation structure.
So it sounds like HR is kind of stuck in the middle. They need to attract and keep those talented people, but they've also got to deal with budget limitations.
It's all about balance. For those really in-demand roles, like those skilled technicians we were talking about earlier, companies might offer things like retention bonuses or create specialized career paths. They want to keep those employees engaged and satisfied. But any extra perks or incentives, they have to be weighed against the overall financial health of the company.
It sounds like companies are having to get a lot more creative in how they attract and retain employees in this new environment. So how do you think this is going to impact the types of benefits packages companies are offering?
I think we're going to see more companies offering flexible work arrangements, like flexible schedules or remote work options, maybe even performance-based incentives. It's all about making your company as appealing as possible to potential hires, even when times are tough.
Makes sense. Is there anything else companies should be keeping in mind as they navigate this new landscape?
Transparency is key. When HR is open with employees about, how tariffs are impacting the company's financial situation and how that trickles down to things like compensation, it builds trust.
So open communication is crucial. It makes employees feel like they're in the loop, right?
Yeah.
It encourages them to be more collaborative.
Absolutely. That open dialogue, it's essential, especially when you're dealing with, these kinds of outside pressures like tariffs. It creates a more supportive work environment.
Louisa, this has been really insightful. Before we move on, I want to touch on one more aspect.
Yeah.
How are tariffs changing, the geography of talent? Like where those talented people are located?
Tariffs definitely play a role in where companies choose to set up shop, and that, of course, influences where those jobs are created. So let's say a tech company is hit with those higher import fees on, specialized components. They might decide, hey, let's move our production closer to where the engineering talent is, and that creates a boom in new jobs in that region. And HR, they have to adapt quickly to those shifts.
It's almost like a domino effect, One change leads to another.
Exactly. HR departments need to be agile, responsive to keep up. And technology, it's really a game changer here.
That's what I was just thinking about. Tools like applicant tracking systems and all those digital onboarding platforms, they seem essential in a world that's changing so fast.
Oh, absolutely. They let HR ramp up hiring in new locations, manage compliance in different places, make sure everything's running smoothly. It's all about efficiency, agility. But even with the fanciest tech, you still need those human experts, the ones who understand the little details of labor laws and regulations.
So the human side of HR is as important as ever.
Absolutely. You need a team who knows about visas, taxes, collective bargaining agreements, all those nitty-gritty details. The goal is a positive employee experience, no matter where your people are located.
That sounds incredibly challenging, especially with all the complexities of managing global talent and those ever-present tariffs.
Yeah. It's a challenging field, no doubt. But that's also what makes HR so rewarding. You're constantly learning, adapting, finding solutions. And in this world where tariffs are constantly reshaping how business is done globally, the role of HR is more crucial than ever.
We were just talking about how important HR is in managing this whole global talent pool, especially with tariffs being such a big factor. And one thing that really stuck with me is, to really do this well, you need more than just HR expertise. It's about collaboration, different departments working together.
Oh, absolutely. Trying to tackle these challenges alone just siloed off in HR, it just won't work. We're seeing a real need for, procurement, finance, and HR. All these teams, they've got to be talking to each other, sharing information, working together to figure out how tariffs might impact their plans.
Can you give us an example of how this might work in the real world?
Sure. Let's say your procurement team, they're keeping an eye on what's happening in global trade, and they see that the price of a key component might go up because of new tariffs, right? They'd immediately, give HR a heads up. And with that information, HR can start planning ahead. Maybe they need to cross-train employees for different tasks or start looking for new people with specific skills.
So it's all about being proactive, not just reacting when things change.
Exactly. And finance, they're a big part of this too. They can give HR real-time updates on the budget, which helps them make decisions about things like compensation, hiring freezes, whether to invest in training new talent. When all these departments are on the same page, it's like this unified front, right? They can handle those unexpected tariff hikes, maybe even turn them into opportunities.
It seems like this kind of collaboration is, really key to building a company that's resilient, that can adapt to change.
No doubt about it. It's about breaking down those walls, those silos, and creating a culture where everyone shares responsibility. When people understand how tariffs affect the whole company, how their own work plays a part in dealing with those challenges, well, you've got a much stronger organization, one that can adapt.
So it's not just HR that needs to adapt to these tariffs. It's the whole company that needs to rethink how they approach talent.
That's a great point. It's a whole shift in thinking. Tariffs, they're more than just numbers. They're driving this huge change in how we work. The companies that get that adapt proactively, those are the ones that will succeed.
We've talked about collaboration, this more holistic view of talent. But, if we take a step back, what are the skills, the qualities that are going to be really valuable in a future where tariffs are so influential? What kind of workforce should companies be building?
That's the big question. As tariffs change global trade, they're also changing the skills that are most in demand. We're already seeing this need for people who understand logistics, how to optimize supply chains, and all those international trade regulations.
So anyone who can manage how goods move around the world and make sure everything's following the rules.
Exactly. And data analytics is another one that's becoming more and more important. With all the uncertainty around tariffs, companies are using data to make decisions. People who can analyze all that data, see the trends, and pull out useful insights, they're going to be in high demand.
So it's like a mix of technical skills and being able to think strategically.
You got it. And we can't forget those soft skills that are always valuable no matter what. Communication, problem solving, being adaptable, resilient. Those are even more important in a world where things are always changing.
So what can HR do to help companies build this workforce of the future?
They have to champion workforce development. That might mean partnering with schools to create training programs for these in-demand skills, or investing in upskilling, reskilling current employees so they stay ahead of the curve, and creating a culture of continuous learning where people are encouraged to take on new challenges, to keep growing.
It sounds like HR is moving away from being mostly administrative to being more strategic, more proactive.
Oh, definitely. It's not just about hiring and firing anymore. It's about developing talent, succession planning, making sure the company has the right people with the right skills for whatever comes their way. And in this world we're talking about, with tariffs changing the global business scene all the time, that role is more critical than ever.
So it's about thinking ahead, figuring out what skills you'll need down the line, and starting to build that pipeline of talent right now.
Yeah, and it's not just about filling the gaps right now. It's about investing in the future of your employees. When you create a culture where people feel appreciated, where they're supported in their growth, you build loyalty, boost morale, and your company becomes more competitive.
Louisa, this has been so valuable. We've covered a lot of ground, but I feel like we've only just scratched the surface of this whole intersection of tariffs and HR. As our listeners try to figure this all out, what are some key takeaways they should keep in mind?
Well, I think the most important thing is, don't think of tariffs as just a financial issue. They're a force for change, and that change affects the whole organization. And HR, they've got a vital role to play in leading that change. So be proactive, be collaborative, and always be looking for ways to build a more agile, adaptable workforce. Understand how the skills landscape is shifting and invest in training programs that help your people thrive in this new reality.
So it's about seeing tariffs not as a threat, but as a chance to rethink and change how we approach talent.
Absolutely. It's about taking the challenge head on and using it to build a stronger, more resilient company. When HR steps up and takes on that leadership role, It can have a huge impact, not just on the company's profits, but on the lives and careers of its employees.
That's a really powerful message. It's a reminder that even when things are uncertain, when there are disruptions, there's always a chance to grow and innovate.
One last thought I want to leave everyone with is this. How is your company adapting to tariffs? Are you just reacting as things happen, or are you taking a proactive, strategic approach to talent? Are your departments working together to see the challenges and find opportunities? Are you investing in your employees so they have the skills they need to thrive in this ever-changing environment? These are the questions you need to be asking.
Welcome back to another episode of HR Game Changers. It's been a really, thought-provoking conversation about how these tariffs are impacting HR.
It's one of those things that I think a lot of people don't really think about, but as we've seen, it has some pretty big implications for businesses, no matter what industry they're in or how big they are.
Yeah. We've talked about how tariffs are driving all these changes, like bringing production back home, that increase in remote work, even changes in how companies approach compensation. And of course, we talked about, the need for departments to work together and how important it is to build a workforce that's ready for all this.
And for me, the big takeaway is that HR isn't just, reacting to all this. They're actually shaping the future of work by thinking ahead, by working together, and by focusing on talent development. HR professionals are helping their companies not only to survive, but to actually do really well in this world where tariffs are so important.
I love that perspective. It's like instead of seeing disruption, you see this chance for positive change.
Exactly. It's about realizing that tariffs, even though they're tough, they also create some real opportunities for growth and innovation. And the companies that get that, the ones where HR is leading the way, they're the ones that are going to come out on top.
So as we wrap things up here, what's the one thing you really want our listeners to walk away with? What's that lasting thought you want them to have?
I want them to think about how tariffs can actually be a catalyst for positive change. It's not just about surviving them, but about using them as a way to build a company that's stronger, more adaptable, and more forward-thinking.
I love that. It's not about just weathering the storm. It's about using it to move forward.
And remember, HR is not alone in this. Work with other departments, communicate openly, and always be looking for ways to grow. You can take these challenges and turn them into opportunities to, reinvent your company and really set your workforce up for success.
It's been a fantastic conversation. Thank you for joining us for another episode of HR Game Changers. Until next time, keep innovating, keep learning, and keep changing the game.